Good evening, everyone. It is 6 o'clock p.m., Tuesday, July 13th, 2021. I'd like to welcome everyone in our council chamber audience, as well as Brady Johnson and the listening audience at WCBU. Brady Johnson is the new WCBU reporter for city council meetings. I also like to welcome the audience at Cable Channel 22. This is to call the meeting of the Peoria City Council to order. Okay. Am I unmuting? Hey, Paul, I attempted to unmute the mics. It didn't move. Okay. Madam Clerk, the council mics are open. Can you please call the roll?
Mayor Ali. Councilmember Allen.
Present.
Councilmember Sear.
Here.
Councilmember Graham.
Here.
Councilmember Jackson.
Here.
Councilmember Jensen. Councilmember Kelly. Councilmember Euler.
Here.
Councilmember Riggenbach.
Here.
Councilmember Ruckriegel.
Present.
You have a quorum present, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. A notice was received by a member of the City Council in accordance with the rules established in ordinance number 16,142, and the member will be deemed authorized to attend the meeting electronically unless a motion objecting to the member's electronic attendance is made, seconded, and approved by 2/3 of the members of the City Council physically present at the meeting. If no such motion is made and seconded, then the request by the member to attend electronically shall be deemed approved by the City Council and the presiding officer, and shall declare the requesting member present. So it is Council Member Karen Velpula that has requested to attend electronically. And so I see no objections. So Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Velpula.
Here.
Okay. Okay. Everyone, please join me and stand for a moment of silent prayer or silent reflection, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay. We have no proclamations tonight. I would ask Councilmember Euler.
Chairwoman, I move to approve the minutes of the City Council meeting held on June 22nd, 2021 as printed.
Seconded by Councilman Allen. Are there any corrections or changes? Seeing none, please cast your ballots. That motion is approved. Thank you. Madam Clerk?
We are at the town portion of the agenda. 21-197 is a request from the town officials to approve the June 2021 actual expenditures and to approve the July 2021 anticipated expenditures for the town of the city of Peoria.
Councilmember Graham?
Mayor Ali, I would move to approve and then want to make some comments.
Okay, is there a second? Seconded by Councilman Ruckriegel. Okay. Councilman Graham?
This is pretty much routine, but what's not going to be routine is the grand opening of our new township office. You'll all be invited. It's being readied as we speak, and that's at Main and Flora Street. It will house both the Supervisor of Assistance office as well as the Supervisor of Assessments. And perhaps you'll see reflected in the expenditures that have occurred, some of the work that's being done there, and I think you'll all enjoy the grand opening as soon as Supervisor Leary gives us the green light.
Okay, thank you for that. We have a motion and a second. Trustees, are there any questions or comments on this action? Okay. If not, please cast your ballots. Motion is approved. Council Peterson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a point of order, we may need to call for Councilman Velpula's vote verbally since he won't show up on the screen.
Thank you very much for that reminder. Councilman Velpula, can you please cast your vote?
Cast yes.
Was that an aye?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you. So, yes, I see that too. Okay, approve unanimously. Member Seer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just had a question for previous item, I believe, was for the budget for Mr. Graham. As the liaison, Mr. Graham, are we supposed to ask questions to you for the township, or? Because there's a lot of large checks. They're being going out here, and mainly for building remodeling. And I was just curious about how is that going? Are we on budget? And just maybe a little report on that, please.
Not going to be damaging our budget at all. A very good job was done contemplating what we would need to do to retrofit this building, which, as you know, was acquired from SEFCU at, I think, a very reasonable price. And we knew that we were going to have to do some retrofitting to make it work. And I had the distinct pleasure of getting a little preview of what all of you are going to see several weeks ago at the request of our township supervisor, Leary, and supervisor of assessments, Max Schlafly. And I think it's going to be spectacular. It's providing enough room for us to grow as we develop as a community and have greater needs. It also contemplated the possibility of a meeting area for maybe senior citizens or whatever, but I think the general feeling is that the two offices and their employees need to get into the space and see what more actually needs to be done by way of retrofitting it and getting it ready to go. Sometimes you don't know what you want to do precisely with the house until actually you move into it. And they're on the verge of doing that. I also know that the township offices will soon, and none of these anticipated expenditures are going to be predicated or shaped in any way by this, but I believe the townships in the country are in line for some help also by virtue of the American Rescue Act. And so I cannot quantify what that will mean money-wise, but it will certainly put us in a stronger position than we are now, and we're in a strong position right now with our reserves.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you for that question. All right, Madam Clerk?
We are at the consent agenda. 91-198 is a communication from the Mayor and Corporation Council with a request to approve the declaration of local state of emergency. 21-199 is a communication from the City Manager and Director of Public Works with a request to accept the low bid of Microsurfacing Contractors, LLC, and to award a construction contract in the amount of $227,708.21, which includes the base bid plus 10% contingency for the high-quality aggregate polymer modified slurry seal contract 2021. 21-200 is a communication with a request to accept the low bid of R.A. Cullinan & Son, Inc., a division of United Contractors Midwest, and award a construction contract in the amount of $549,344.50 for the base bid plus 10% contingency for the seal coating contract 2021. 21-201 is a communication with a request to approve the low bid of C&G Concrete Construction Company, Inc., in the amount of $649,812 and award a contract for the North Side Business Park TIF sidewalk improvements with an additional authorization of $30,588, 4.7% for contingencies, for a total contract award of $680,400. 21-102 is a communication with a request to approve the low bid of Nat Concrete Contractors, Inc. in the amount of $424,583.99 and award a contract for the Nebraska Corridor upgrade with an additional authorization of $42,416.01, 10% for contingencies, for a total contract award of $467,000. 21-203 is a communication with a request for the following. A, to approve an incumbency certificate and resolution accepting a grant from the Illinois Housing Development Authority for the Abandoned Residential Property Municipality Relief Fund in the amount of $45,000. And B, adopt an ordinance amending the City of Peoria 2021 revised annual budget relating to the capital fund to recognize the receipt of a grant from the Illinois Housing Development Authority for the Abandoned Residential Property Municipality Relief Fund and corresponding expenditures in the amount of $45,000. 21-195 is a communication with a request to concur with a recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission and staff to adopt an ordinance amending Appendix A, the Unified Development Code, relating to fulfillment centers. 21-204 is an appointment by Mayor Ali to the Technical Committee of the Tri-County Regional Planning Commission with request to concur of GIS Asset Management Coordinator Alyssa McLean, Superintendent of Operations Deputy Director Cy Maroon, and Vice President Hanson Professional Services, Inc. of Cindy Luce. 21-205 is an appointment by Mayor Ali to the Historic Preservation Commission with a request to concur of Edward J. Berry, Jr. 21-206 is an appointment by Mayor Ali to the Tourism Reserve Fund with a request to concur of Councilmember Sid Paul Ruckriegel. And that concludes your consent agenda.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Are there any items to remove from consent? Councilmember Jackson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Over the last 3 or 4 days, have been trying to do my due diligence with regards to the contracts, and hats off to the city manager and Mr. Rick Powers. I've been on the phone with him as late as 4:30 this afternoon trying to gather information. And while I like to commend the city for its due diligence in trying to make sure that we meet standards with regards to minority hiring, and workforce participation as well as subcontracting.
Councilmember, I'm going to just intervene for a minute and just ask for the number that you want to speak to.
21-200.
Once we get to that number, then you can communicate the details.
21-200.
Okay. Any other? Do you have any other, Councilmember Jackson?
That's the only one.
Is that it? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Grab?
Mayor Ali, was that 21-199 that was pulled?
Okay.
Is that what Counselor Jackson?
Oh, she asked for 21-200. Is that the one that you meant?
Yes, well, I would like to extract 21-199.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Ruckriegel?
Thank you. 21-206.
Okay, any other items? Can I get a motion to approve the remaining items? Councilmember Riggenbach, seconded by Councilmember Jackson. Any other questions, comments? Please cast your ballots to approve those remaining items. Okay, those are approved unanimously. Oh, nope, let me back up. Councilmember Valpula, online.
Aye. Aye.
Okay. Okay. Approved unanimously. Thank you. All right. Fertar?
21-199 is a communication with a request to accept the low bid of microsurfacing contractors and to award a construction contract in the amount of $227,708.21, which includes the base bid plus 10% contingency for the high-quality aggregate polymer modified slurry seal contract 2021.
Councilmember Greb?
Can't wait to get all of these approved. All one needs to do is drive around the city and feel the steering wheel. We have a lot of road work that needs to be done that impacts the entire city, not any particular district. But, Manager, I'm going to direct this to you first, and then perhaps we'll have a little segue to Director Powers. Is this something new that we are building into these appropriation requests, contingencies with a certain percentage involved?
Generally, for the pavement preservation program, because we're doing work kind of all over the city within certain streets that will be either doing the seal coating or the slurry seal, we've been trying to build in some contingencies just to make sure that if we have any additional costs that we've covered that. Sometimes the cost of materials with the price inflation that we've been seeing lately has been something that we've been concerned with. And I'd be happy to defer to Director Powers for a more specific response in that regard.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. You pretty much nailed it, especially the latter part with binder and the primary ingredient in both of these contracts being petroleum byproducts. The price of gas generally correlates to the price of binder.
Can you speak up just a little bit, Director?
Sorry. I said you pretty much covered it, Mr. Manager, that if you look at fuel prices, they pretty much correlate to binder prices, which these materials consist of to hold together, and we use a lot of. So that contingency addresses not only any added work we might find, but primarily materials, because we are experiencing inflationary prices.
And Director Powers and Manager Urick, perhaps to, while one might be concerned that this is a temptation to run up the tab, so to speak, if the word gets out that the council has provided these contingencies, we feel we have the ability to prevent that abuse from happening. Is that correct, Manager?
That is correct. And there's a specific scope of streets that they'll be doing their work on, and that's the rationale behind that. So.
And there is another reason, perhaps, by virtue of when our council meetings fall. We don't want to delay any farther than we have to this all-important work. My goodness, we are almost, well, we are. 2 days will be mid-July.
Correct.
There's a lot of work to do in this town.
Correct.
And, we start running out of conditions adequate for road work long around November or so. So I just wanted to make certain we're being fiscally responsible, building in these percents. I note down the road here, we're talking on a different item, which I'm not going to pull, 4.7%. Curious as to why they're not all 10%, but, I'm not going to belabor that. Thank you, Mayor Ali.
Do you have a motion, Councilman?
I'd move to approve as outlined.
Okay, seconded by Councilman Riggenbach. Any more comments on that item? If not, please cast your ballots. Councilmember Velpula,
Aye.
that's approved unanimously. Thank you. Madam Clerk?
21-200 is a communication with a request to accept the low bid of R.A. Cullinan & Son, Inc., a division of United Contractors Midwest, and award a construction contract in the amount of $549,344.50 for the base bid plus 10% contingency for the seal coating contract 2021.
Councilmember Jackson?
This is not the one I voted to defer, but I had some questions about this particular contract, and the Public Works Director did show me in a utilization form this afternoon how the company had put forth its good faith efforts. So I will be supporting this particular bid.
Okay, you want to make a motion?
Yes, I would like to make a motion that item number 21-200 be accepted.
Okay, can I get a second to that? Seconded by Councilman Euler. Any other comments or questions on this item? Please cast your ballots. Councilmember Velpula,
Aye.
that motion is approved unanimously. Madam Clerk?
21-206 is an appointment by Mayor Ali to the Tourism Reserve Fund with a request to concur of Councilmember Sid Paul Reckrigal.
Councilmember Reckrigal.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just let the record show that I'll be abstaining from this vote.
Okay,
Thanks.
all right. That's good. Can we get a motion to approve it? Councilmember Euler, seconded by Councilmember Seer. Any other comments? Please cast your ballots. Let me clear the tally. Thank you. Councilmember Velpula,
Aye.
there's one abstention. Councilmember Reckrigal, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 ayes. Okay. Thank you. Madam Clerk?
We are at first readings. 21-196 is a communication from the City Manager and Director of Community Development with a request to concur with a recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission and staff to receive and file a first reading of an ordinance amending Appendix A of the Unified Development Code relating to amendments to the permitted use table related to permitted and special uses.
Mr. Manager?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to ask Director Black to come and discuss the item in front of you this evening that talks about permitted and special uses.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. So this item is a relatively small cleanup of some text within the zoning ordinance. Specifically, Mayor Artis had requested back in April that we look at the status of car washes and whether they should be permitted uses or special uses within the C1 zoning district. We sat down, we went through, we looked at other permitted uses within the C1 district that were as intense or perhaps more intense in terms of a use as car washes. So, for example, gas stations, convenience stores, restaurants with drive-through lanes, and all flavors of general commercial uses are permitted within the C1 district. Car washes, I'm unable to tell you why they were special uses. I can tell you that doing the research back to the original city zoning ordinance in 1931, there were car washes. They were called vehicle laundries at that time, and they were special uses. So I think it's just something that's been carried forward for 90 years now. So the recommendation is to move the status of car washes from special uses to permitted uses within the C1 district. This would align with the other commercial districts where they are permitted uses. And then at the same time, we looked at other uses within the zoning ordinance that we felt really should be permitted uses or be allowed as a special use. And none of them are particularly dramatic. We're recommending that beekeeping be permitted within agricultural districts. And then there's a few other changes to allow some very light industrial repair of instruments within the commercial districts. I do want to mention that when we took this item to the Planning and Zoning Commission, we did include a recommendation or a consideration that was related to apartments within the commercial districts. We have withdrawn that from this, so there's no change to where apartments can be developed in town at this point, because we believe that the discussion of where apartments are permitted uses and where apartments are special uses really belongs as its own discussion as part of a larger policy on housing in the city. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Questions for Director Black? Motion to receive and file, Councilman Riggenbach, seconded by Councilmember Euler. Any other questions, comments? Please cast your ballots. Councilmember Velpula?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion to receive and file is approved unanimously. Councilmember Jackson?
Thank you, Madam President. I need a motion. I need to make a motion to reconsider the actual agenda item that I wanted deferred was item number 21-202. And
Council Peterson, can you give some guidance on that motion to reconsider?
Sure, that motion would be appropriate when we reach unfinished business.
Okay.
okay, thank you.
Thank you. So you're moving to reconsider item from the consent agenda 21-202. Can I get a second? Go ahead.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Now, when you asked me to make a motion earlier, I gave you the number of 21-200, which I do support.
Right.
Which is fine. I just want to make sure we're making the correct
Sure,
motion.
but you intended to discuss 21-202.
Correct.
Is that correct? So you're moving to reconsider that motion.
21-202?
Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Deferred, and we can discuss it after I've had an opportunity to meet with the city manager. Then I will be better informed as to how to support it.
Right, so I think we need the motion to reconsider first, and then we can take up your deferral.
Okay.
Okay. Can I get a second? Okay, Councilman Graham seconds the motion to reconsider Any comments, objections, or any comments or communication on that? Not. Please cast your ballots for the motion to reconsider item 21-202. Councilmember Velpula?
Aye.
The motion to reconsider passes unanimously. Okay, Councilmember Jackson, you want to speak to that item?
Item number
21-202.
Yes. Yes, I would. I had some questions. This is a relatively new contractor, and while they talk about good faith efforts, last year we had some capital projects, but last year pretty much was a bit of an aberration due to COVID. So I have more questions I'd like to discuss with the city manager with regards to this, if I could. And I believe after I've had all of those answered, I will be in a position to make a decision on this in a couple of weeks.
Okay, so you're moving to defer for 2 weeks?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second? Councilmember Allen? Okay, any more discussion? Okay. Councilmember Ruckriegel?
Hi, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm totally good with the deferral and appreciate this being able to get this correct because we want to make sure we get the right number and the right item being considered here. I think just for point of order, though, this would come in under unfinished business at the end of the meeting versus where we are right now. Just technical point.
Okay,
there.
I appreciate that. That was my bad.
Yeah,
Then.
and again,
I got a lot more mistakes coming.
Totally good with the reconsideration,
Okay.
and totally in favor of that. I think it probably would fall under unfinished business.
Okay, thank you. How can we handle this right now?
Technically, we should probably
Just move it.
mentioned before, just move it to unfinished business. However, since you're already this far into the discussion, if you want to continue it now, I don't think that it will sort of hurt the other items on the
Okay,
agenda.
any objections continuing?
Not at all.
Councilman?
Not at all.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Councilmember Riggenbach?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I think my colleagues all know how important this project is to me and the East Bluff and even the second district down the road, I believe. This was in the CIP for last year, got pushed off to this year, so I totally respect Councilwoman Jackson's request for the information, and a 2-week deferral I don't think will hinder it, but just know I'll be standing up in 2 weeks championing the cause again.
Okay,
So thank you.
all right, thank you. All right, we have a motion to defer and a second. Any other additional comments, clarifications? Please cast your ballots. Councilmember Velpula?
Aye.
All right, motion to defer item 21-202 is approved 2 weeks. Thank you. Madam Clerk?
21-207 is a communication from the City Manager and Corporation Council with a request to receive and file a report regarding licensing requirements for gas stations and potential amendments to the retail gasoline dealer license and the tobacco license.
Okay, Councilmember Graham?
I know this item is of great importance to all of us and certainly to Councilor Jackson as well. Manager, you and I conversed a little bit about this. Could you put a frame on this with our corporation counsel, and then we can take it from there?
Thank you, Councilman. Yes, Corporation Counsel did a nice job of kind of outlining the issues surrounding our regulatory scheme with regards to gas stations and not only liquor but tobacco. So I'll defer to our Corporation Counsel to kind of walk through some of the suggestions here that we've put together in this report back for you.
I think we all know that, unfortunately, there have been an uptick in violent incidents at some of our gasoline stations throughout Peoria in the last year. And when looking at some potential ways to strengthen to strengthen our response, the police department has done an excellent job meeting with the individual business owners. But we did look at our ordinances to see if there was a way we could strengthen either our licensing or enforcement mechanisms to give them some more robust authority to respond to these incidents. And it's interesting because we have gas stations that solely have a gas retailer license. Then we have those that may have a tobacco license and may also have a liquor license on top of that. So you have to actually look at exactly which licensing regulatory scheme each and every gas station falls under, but we could make some general suggestions that will apply to one or all three of those. So as to sort of the retail gasoline dealer license, all of the gas stations in the city of Peoria are required to have this with the city. This is the mechanism that they use to self-report their motor fuel taxes. And when we looked at it, we noticed that the application does require the applicant to attest that they will comply with all the laws of the city or the state or the federal laws, but it does not necessarily give us the authority to suspend or revoke a license if there is a violation of another law. We can fine them, and the hearing officer has the authority to suspend or revoke a license if there is a violation of the tax section. So, for example, if somebody refuses or fails to pay their motor fuel tax, the hearing officer would have the authority to suspend the license, but not for another violation. So that is something that we're suggesting that the council consider in an ordinance form to consider as a change to include that a violation of another city ordinance, state, or federal law would be a basis to suspend or revoke a license. That would, again, be the gas stations as to the gas station license solely. As to the liquor license, we provided a list of gas stations and convenience stores that have liquor licenses, and we noted that they weren't allowed to sell alcohol between the hours of 1 a.m. and 6 a.m. We really don't have any recommendations for changes to the liquor code at this time. It already has some rather robust enforcement provisions because we have the opportunity to implement a plan of operation which would allow altering or limiting the sale hours if needed. And we do have the authority, again, rather robust authority through the Liquor Commission and Commissioner to look at revoking or suspending licenses when there are inappropriate instances. The tobacco licenses, if you recall, the City Council made some minor amendments to just within the last couple of years. We increased the age of sales for tobacco. But one thing we noticed that had never been implemented in the ordinance was an hour of sale. So tobacco can be sold 24 hours. So there are certainly gas stations that just have a gas station license and they do not have any tobacco or liquor sales. There are also gas stations that do not have liquor sales but have tobacco licenses. So if we were to consider limiting the tobacco sales between 1 a.m. and 6 a.m., that would put those gas stations and convenience stores' tobacco sales in line with what they are allowed to sell for packaged liquor goods during that exact same time frame. So those were two potential changes that we came up with that we wanted to ask for council's input and direction on.
And let's face it, the only reason this is on the agenda is we've had a relatively small number of operators who have not been sensitive to the needs of the larger community. And what I don't want to do is, and I don't believe this council wants to penalize or be unduly harsh with the vast majority of our operations, gas stations, service stations, convenience store operations that do a splendid job and report problems to the police and maintain a clean establishment, keep their grounds up, etc. But Obviously, manager, it's what we were talking about. You and I aren't attorneys, but we do understand that it is a privilege to be able to have a liquor license, be able to sell tobacco, and that if people aren't respectful of this, then that privilege can be revoked. Dwight Eisenhower once said, "A people that values its privileges above its principles soon loses both." So in terms of what might be the best course for us tonight, we're basically looking at receiving and filing a report, leaving all of our options open, and trying to work in a congenial way with all of our businesses. But when we can't get their attention, then we'll have to take a look at course B.
And Councilman, that's a great point. I think to that course B, the first recommendation that Corporation Counsel outlined was the strengthening up or beefing up our ability to revoke a license if you're in violation of a federal law, a state law, or a city ordinance. And I think that's something, if council so desires, that you want us to codify that, bring that back in 2 weeks, we can do that and make sure that strengthens that up. The second recommendation about banning tobacco during the hours of 1 a.m. to 6 a.m. is really probably more of a policy decision. Well, they're both policy decisions, but there may be more discussion that council may want to have. From my perspective, I would strongly concur with that first recommendation to strengthen up the revocation clause in that gas station license, because as you said, it's a privilege, and it's something that we could look at strengthening that.
And tonight, are you looking for direction to do that from us?
Yes. I mean, if council is comfortable with moving in that direction, we'll bring back a first reading to change that ordinance in 2 weeks.
And I would yield to the other councilors to weigh in on this.
Councilmember Ruckriegel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thank you to council members Jackson and Greb for bringing this to light. And I think Councilmember Greb really talked about that this is not for the masses that are out there, but for those that have become that small number that's the problem. And that's why we have in front of us the information we have. Thank you also to our corporate counsel for bringing this information. Just a question and this can either be for city manager or for corporate counsel. Can you discuss a little bit on those fines that are levied that go unpaid, and what happens at that point, and if there's any sort of recourse, or do we have any sort of action for unpaid fines, and is that a piece that needs to be incorporated in here as well?
It depends on which section we're looking at. For liquor code, yes, obviously we would consider a license revocation, and under tobacco too. For the gas station retailer's license, it's specific that the first fine would be something not less than 200 nor more than 300, and then after that it goes up between 300 and 500. It gives a 180-day time frame in which they can be punishable. And then, of course, depending on whether or not those fines are paid, then we look at a revocation hearing. There's a separate section in that particular code that has to do with the motor fuel taxes itself, and that's sort of a separate issue from fines and fees.
Councilmember Allen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I appreciate you all providing some clarification. I like the idea of going with option one because I think it penalizes that small portion that are not obeying by the ordinance. I would hate to go to option two and everyone has to pay for the mistakes of a few, and I would hate to regulate the sale of tobacco for everyone in the city from 1 a.m. to 6 a.m. and take away from business, especially we are now we're seeing the light on the other side of the pandemic. We're still in it, and so I think this would be a hard time to really slap the hand on our business owners and regulate tobacco sale just because of a few bad apples. So I would support option one if we could bring that back. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Greb, did you have more?
Well, if everyone's weighed in, I would ask our administration to bring, as Councilor Allen has so beautifully outlined, the first choice and ability to strengthen in that area only for the reasons he eloquently outlined.
Any other discussion? I get a motion to receive and file. I'm sorry, go ahead, Councilman.
Yes, I'd move to receive and file.
Okay. Seconded by Councilmember Jackson. Any other discussion? Please cast your ballots. Councilmember Velpula.
Aye.
That motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
21-208 is a communication from the City Manager and Corporation Council with a request to receive and file a report regarding the status of the law for panhandling and solicitation.
Councilmember Greb?
I would like to once again thank our legal staff for their expansive research into the whole issue of panhandling and what our U.S. Supreme Court has ruled. Whether I like it or not, or whether we all like it or not, it is the law of the land until it's changed. But likewise, we do have laws already, and I don't want to reinvent the wheel or litigate or legislate something that's already there. We already have the ability, folks, to make certain people aren't in the middle of a street. We already have that power. We already have the power to keep people off median strips in our city and on our state highways. We don't need to look somewhere in our black books of ordinances. I got 2 huge ones at home to find this power. We have it already. Manager, we just need you to know that we want the police department to get people the hell out of the street who don't belong there for their own good as well as for the motorist who's trying to drive, we hope, safely. That's what I'm looking for on this. I'm not looking for creating any more legislation. We already have the power to do this. We just need to do it.
Anyone else want to speak to this item? Councilmember Jackson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree with Councilmember Greb. It seems like to me this problem runs a little bit deeper. I was talking to one of my other colleagues earlier today, and I have never seen so many people standing on medians and street corners than I have over the past year. I can probably count maybe 3 episodes that I saw today. And I would hope that we as a council would look a little bit deeper as to why this is occurring within our community. We talk so often about wanting to do something to eliminate poverty. Obviously, they're out there for money. Maybe there's some way we can collaborate with the consortium or some other agencies to find out why we're seeing more people out than I've ever seen before, to maybe be a little bit more effective, Councilman Greb, in dealing with this. We all know that we have staffing issues And I don't know that we have enough police officers to effectively deal with the magnitude of the problem that I've seen lately, considering we've seen spikes in violence and things of that nature. So maybe it would behoove us to look at some other ways that we might be able to enforce this a little bit more effectively. Thank you.
Councilmember Riggenbach?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Corporation Counsel, we've talked about this offline as well, and it seems to me that the conclusion is pretty much what you said here under consideration number one, that if we start to enforce this, then that would prohibit the St. Jude or the MDA or the other groups from doing their solicitation on the streets. So I think, is that correct? Let me make sure I'm not misinterpreting what.
We have to be consistent in enforcement, and it cannot be targeted against one particular group, specifically panhandlers, for all the reasons I outlined in this overly lengthy legal memo detailing the history. It would have to be enforced consistently against all the groups that would be obstructing the public right-of-way. So, for example, our firefighters often participate in the MDA Fill the Boot campaign. That could be considered an obstruction of traffic. Our St. Jude runners and supporters often do can shaking campaigns in intersections. That could be considered obstruction of traffic. We would have to be consistent throughout the city in our enforcement.
I've talked to people about this, and I'm sure all of us have had people bring this to our attention, how it is, as Councilwoman Jackson said, and Councilman Gray, for that matter, it just seems like it's exploded, and we're seeing this at intersections and not just on the street corners at the parking lots like it had been. So there clearly is something taking place, and I too would think perhaps reaching out to jolt harm reduction. I've talked with Chris Schaffner about this. What is some of the background that's causing that? So I think we would want to be slow to take away that right of free speech that many of the nonprofits avail themselves of to raise funds. And good grief, if we look at option 2 of licensing, I mean, you can already see how some of the groups could respond to that. But I would like a little more thought given to this, because clearly it's a problem, and it goes beyond the panhandling. I mean, it's a safety issue that somebody's going to get hurt badly. I mean, it just seems like one of those things that's an accident waiting to happen at some level. So, and I know I'm only the second or third person to talk, but I really think we need to look at, is there a way to do licensing without a fee attached to it? That have people, the St. Jude or the MDA people register somewhere in order to allow that? Would that be an option?
You certainly set the cost for the license, but I would like to comment on just one point that you made. Public safety is really a separate issue from the discussion of panhandling, and we have to separate those two issues because the courts have said we have to. So recently the Supreme Court declined to hear an appeal from a community in Oklahoma that had addressed panhandling in a way that they banned anyone standing on any public median that was 6 feet or wider, and I think the traffic speed had to be 35 or 30 miles an hour or greater. But because that was done within the discussion of panhandling, The federal court struck that down, and the Supreme Court would not hear their petition on appeal. I will tell you, in all of our research into this, though, Gainesville, Florida, and Des Moines, Iowa, and recently have adopted ordinances that were similar to what we saw in Oklahoma, that it prevented people from standing in a median that was, I think, 4 feet or 6 feet in width on streets that had a certain speed. But those were based strictly and solely on engineering reports. Their city engineer had looked at traffic data. They had looked at accidents where vehicles and pedestrians had collided. They looked at speed on the road, and it did not apply to every intersection in the city. It applied to those where there was the greatest concern based on the engineering data. So if that is an issue, and we are seeing an unfortunate collision of pedestrians and traffic, we would want to address that, but it would need to be done by some objective data with our Public Works Department.
If I may.
Yes, go ahead.
So would it be the appropriate request be to have Public Works review the impact on safety of having pedestrians in certain areas such as this?
I would be happy to talk with them about what sort of the scope and cost of a traffic study like that might look like. They would obviously have to coordinate with the police department to pull, accident data to see where some of those high impact zones may be, because we may very well have true public safety concerns where we are having vehicles and pedestrians collide, where we need to look at having bans on those particular high traffic, high accident intersections.
I would suggest that's a good place to start. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Riggenbach, and thank you, Council Peterson, for the research. And I mean, we need this type of legal advice and those examples in Des Moines, and that's very, very, very helpful. I like the direction that you're going. Councilmember Euler.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and I certainly echo the fact that this is a major problem and is continuing to become a bigger and bigger problem all the time, and we need to do something to address it. But some of the conversation about whether we do or don't address something based on the impact of charities concerns me. From my standpoint, we shouldn't be doing any of this in public right-of-ways and intersections. The charities as well can find more reasonable places to do this, and saying that because it's a charity we should allow them to put people's lives at risk. It's concerned me for a long time, and I've even called the city manager in the past about some of the charity type organizations standing in public right-of-ways and doing this, and I think this is an opportunity to address that. There's lots of opportunities in our community to ask for money and safe places to do it, but public right-of-ways, in my opinion, is a no-go. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Graham.
I think it is altogether unfortunate, although probably was inevitable, that this whole issue of people standing in the street, standing on median strips, would get tied into panhandling and a Supreme Court case. You know, I can remember when there was a situation a while back where people were eligible for tickets because they were jaywalking out of 419 Fulton to go across the street. Now, let's just use some common sense here, and let's just forget about wearing black robes and being 9 justices right now. Does it seem reasonable to you? It doesn't to my constituents. That we do not have the power to tell people to get out of the middle of an intersection who are there, and maybe in some cases it's because they want money? Really? So the idea of the great life, the good life, is that everybody should be able to go out into the middle of the street and beg with a sign, even though they're creating a hazard for themselves and for the motorists. Is that really where we are? It's unacceptable. We have the ability to ticket people who do that and who continue to do that right now. It doesn't have to be wrapped up in any big Supreme Court case. It's just common sense. Now, as for the deeper problems, we want to talk about the sociology of all this. I'm happy to talk about the sociology of it. Delighted to talk about the sociology of it. And our city staff has done a great job trying to deal with this problem humanely. We had somebody who worked for our city for a while. Her name was Kate Green. And I believe right now, manager, she does one heck of a job for us, trying to reach folks who are endangering themselves and putting even motorists at risk by doing these aberrant things. How many times have we reached out to try to deal with our frequent flyer offenders? I would count probably 100 times just in the past few months. So the idea that we are not a humane community attempting to deal with the root causes would be wrong. I think we can do more. That's why you've been hearing me talk a lot about doing more in the area of mental health treatment, and why I was delighted to see the big investment Unity Point is going to make dealing with behavioral science issues affecting our adolescents. But hopefully we're going to get some more work done in that area. But in the meantime, it's simple. Manager, if people are out in the street, they need to be removed from the street. Period. Those council members who think that this is a radical position should speak up now. To me, it's just common sense. If they need to be referred to a social agency, as we're already doing, then let's continue to do that. But I'm not asking for anything revolutionary here. And I get calls every single day about this. And I see it every single day. And I'll get it down to this too. You know, sometimes I think these folks who are doing this are much smarter than we are. I think they got it all figured out. And I think they had it figured out during the COVID that probably nothing much was going to happen to them. They're way ahead of us. And the other part of the problem, too, is, well, we got a lot of really big-hearted Peorians who start handing money out of their car windows. I had a police officer tell me the other day at a West Bluff Council meeting that you'd be surprised, Counselor, all the people in the middle of Maine and University who are giving folks money. So it is a problem that I think we're making much worse because we're trying to be humane, but we're really not being humane. And I just think that, you know, if we were to have a separate item that said, I don't know, the city manager and the police department should make certain people stay out of the street, I would think we'd have everybody's hand up. Well, when we put it in the same report, blame me for that, as a Supreme Court case on holding up a sign, then somehow our minds get confused. I think they're two different things entirely. If we're not going to enforce the laws in this community, we might as well just give it up, because we will have lost our city. And frankly, there have been many things that have happened in recent days and weeks that make me wonder if we are not a city spinning out of control. If we can't even take care of this, how are we going to take care of some of the larger things we'll be talking about? And I'm going to bring up under new business. Thank you, Mayor Ali.
You're welcome, and thank you all for the discussion. It is a complex issue. It's a complex issue that cities across the country face. Everybody doesn't handle it in the same way. And you're right, Councilman, people do give money in this community to people on the street who are begging because we are a generous, caring community, and we always try to look to help others. So I think it's out of their caring, giving heart that people give to the needy in our community. Yet there are issues of safety. I really like that idea about a study, but I have a question for Council Peterson, that if the Supreme Court says we can't tie these two issues together, how do we have a study that decides this intersection is more dangerous to panhandling? That's tying it together, isn't it?
Well, we would have an intersection that said it would be dangerous to all pedestrian traffic, so not just people standing there soliciting money. So it could identify that nobody should be standing in the median because perhaps that intersection isn't the right one for them to be crossing at because of the speed, for example. But I do know, like I said in our research, the two communities that have recently upgraded and changed their ordinance, they have not been challenged yet, not to say they won't be, but they had very thorough statistics that backed up why they picked certain intersections to be ones where they absolutely banned anyone from standing on it.
Okay. Thank you. Doesn't the discussion can't stop here? Has to continue. We have to make some progress. Councilman Riggenbach?
Can I just ask one more
Yes,
question, Madam?
absolutely.
So, following up with what Councilman Graham just said, and piggybacking that with what Councilman Euler said, if we just enforced number one under your considerations, obstruction of traffic across the board, that would be an acceptable, that wouldn't put us in any legal jeopardy?
So far, just enforcing obstruction of traffic ordinances have been upheld under various vehicle codes. They do not appear to have been targeted by any of the groups that have really brought a lot of these lawsuits on behalf of First Amendment rights.
And a follow-up question then would be, are our existing obstruction of traffic laws adequate, or could we just enforce what's already on the books?
As far as our local ordinances are concerned, you can see in number one that I pointed out that we have an ordinance on the books that prevents or prohibits vehicles from obstructing traffic, but we do not necessarily have a prohibition against a person remaining on the street. Now, there are state vehicle code laws that would apply about people being in the roadway and obstructing traffic.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Graham?
And then Peoria would be in the state of Illinois. Simple. Thank you.
Okay. Motion to receive and file? Okay. Councilman Graham, seconded by Councilmember Riggenbach. Any other discussion? Please cast your ballots. Councilmember Velpula?
Aye.
That passes unanimously. Thank you. Madam Clerk?
21-209 is a communication from the City Manager, Public Works Director, and Corporation Counsel with a request to adopt an ordinance amending Chapter 31, Article 6 of the Code of the City of Peoria relating to appeals of the stormwater utility fee.
Mr. Manager?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The item in front of you this evening is an ordinance revision. I'd like to ask the Corporation Counsel to just outline the reasons why we're asking for this change in the ordinance.
Briefly, when the city adopted its stormwater ordinance in 2017, there was an appeals provision put in place for people that want to challenge the calculation of their stormwater utility bill. And the step 3 of that appeal was to go to the Construction Commission. That was the most logical place to set an appeal at the time. However, we realized now that we have an appeal that has actually worked its way through the third step, that isn't workable because of the appointments on those commission. There are conflicts with more than a majority of the quorum on the commission due to their employers or contracts they have they're actually paid out of the stormwater utility. So in the interest of due process, we're asking to take that third step from the construction commission and place it with an administrative hearing officer to avoid any conflicts of interest.
Okay. Can we get a motion? Councilman Riggenbach? Okay, second? Councilman Euler? Any discussion? Okay, please cast your ballots. Councilmember Valpula?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
21-210 is a communication from the City Manager and Finance Director with a request to receive and file a report on the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds.
Yes, Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You have in front of you in item 21-210 the report backs from our policy session. We had 9 report backs that were put together for council based upon the questions that came back from that policy session on June 1st. The first question being what stormwater backlog projects or combined sewer projects could be addressed with the fiscal recovery funds, and how would this mitigate future borrowing? We do have broad flexibility with these funds to be able to use that and apply those funds towards those projects. We're right now anticipating about $6 million a year of expense in the CSO, so that was included in there. We also have a budget of a little bit more than $5 million in the Stormwater Utility Fund on an annualized basis as well. The second question was what is the public engagement strategy? Staff has put together a timeline with a proposed public engagement strategy that would include the development of a survey. We've put together a very brief survey for the public to weigh in and provide some ideas or suggestions on how to use the funds. We'll be prepared to release that survey tomorrow and get that out for a couple of weeks to allow the public to provide that input to us, to weigh in on where they think the relative priority of the different allowable expenditures are. And then we would take that information, compile it back, and present that back to you in a report back. Looking at like the second meeting in August is when we would bring that back to council with those ultimate recommendations or formal recommendations. We also plan on having 2 public meetings as part of this process, where we would have one meeting at the Lincoln Branch Library and one up at the North Branch Library to just gain more public input, and then hold one session virtually. There's still people that are concerned about being outside due to COVID, so we would plan on a virtual session as well. So we would have 3 points of public meetings as well that we would try and engage the public to gather additional feedback as well. So the third report back question was pertaining to how can the fiscal recovery funds be used for housing rehabilitation and neighborhood stability? And the Community Development Department outlined several suggestions in here that council could consider, not only for the use of the fiscal recovery funds, but as we look ahead towards the 2022 budget. Question 4 was answered by the City Manager's Office and by our Economic Development team, talking about how can the fiscal recovery funds be used for business support, with some suggestions on how those funds could be utilized in that manner. Question 5 was how can the fiscal recovery funds be used for restoring the cuts to public safety services, police, fire, and code enforcement? And there's an answer to that question is included in the report backs. Question number 6 was, how can the fiscal recovery funds be used to address the needs of persons experiencing homeless or the mentally ill? And the staff from the Community Development Department identified the answer to those questions as well, and it's laid out in question number 6. Question number 7 pertains to the number of demolitions that we have as a current backlog in the city, and what could we do if we had some funds that were available for demolition. And that question is answered in question number 7. Question number 8, there was a question about what were the capital projects that were suspended due to COVID. There were some capital projects that we simply pushed over into 2022, some that we suspended. So there's a list here of those suspended projects in question number 8. And then question number 9 was, are there ways that we could use the fiscal recovery funds to address inadequate alley lighting that is leading to illegal dumping in the South Side? And so the staff from the Community Development Department put together some responses here with regards to what we can put together to try and strengthen our efforts to respond to illegal dumping on the South Side. So that's included in the report back. The other items that we did is we had staff over the last several weeks put together a series of potential programs that we could put together based upon the allowable uses of the funds. And those are laid out at the back of the packet following the frequently asked questions that were recently revised by the Treasury Department. And we identified nearly 70 different programs with more than twice the available funding available to be utilized. So looking at the numbers and looking at the amount of funding and the amount of need that obviously that we see in the community, what staff would like to do with the council's concurrence would be that we would get the public input, take that public input back into consideration to formulate some prioritization, some areas of prioritization, and then bring that back to council for a further conversation at that second meeting in August. So we can use that to kind of lead into our budget deliberations as we move into the fall and how we want to allocate these funds. I do think that from my perspective, I would advise that we look at how we might be able to spread this funding out. We know that we have about $36.5 million of available funds, how we might be able to spread that out over the full period of time we have to spend it, which would be really through the end of, we'd have to have it all obligated by the end of 2024 and then fully spent by the end of 2026. So in essence, what that would do is that it would create about $9.2 million a year of funding that we could dedicate towards the impact of COVID and our recovery efforts from COVID, that we could utilize that over that 4-year period of time. And I also think the advantage of that is that mitigates us spending all of the money initially in the first year or so, and then having a big fiscal cliff that we'd have to backfill with other operating revenues that we have, that we may or may not have as we look at our future operating budgets. So this allows us to spread that out over a longer period of time and to really be impactful with the way that we would be spending those dollars. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, Madam Chair.
Just a quick question before I go to council regarding the list in the back, the spending proposal of about 70 items. Is there any priority given to these items at all?
Not at this point in time. Staff really wanted to just kind of put the programs together in some larger buckets so that council could see kind of the categories that they were in. There's also some of these programs that could be geographically specific. One of the areas that we have some flexibility with the programming is the ability to use it within those qualified census tracts where we have more flexibility with some programming of those dollars. So I think what we'd like to do is we've put them into the buckets that we've kind of put them into have been business support, infrastructure, neighborhood revitalization, and then kind of across all of those 3 areas there would be the equity-focused services, which are really kind of dedicated to specific geographic areas. And then the last component would be kind of operational support and operations that would kind of restore some of the operational funding we have. So we'd like to continue to build on that, to craft some more recommendations. knowing that staff put together kind of a larger list that has a multiple years of funding, I'd like to take some time to work with them to polish this list up a bit more and then come back to you with some firmer recommendations about how we might be able to utilize the funding.
So even the categories are not prioritized on this
They're
list?
not. They are not
Nothing is prioritized?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. Council Member Euler?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. First question is more broad. What timeline do you think that we're looking at between community meetings and getting all the way down to actual council decisions on how you see us moving forward after that?
I guess from my perspective, I see this tying beautifully into the budget process for 2022 and 2023. We have a biennial budget where we develop a 2-year spending plan. It would allow us to take that 2-year period of time and to tie this funding right into that. And it makes the most sense to tie that in with looking at we'd be able to look at where our revenues are and what they look like and what our other spending needs may be. I'm pretty optimistic right now that we're seeing a pretty good recovery into our revenues here for the first half of the year, so that's some positive news. So I think that this would tie right in with that and would be the most effective way for us to have that conversation is to tie that into the budget process.
Thank you. And then specifically on question 7 regarding demolitions, can you go ahead and have that conversation to try and find out what we could work out from a tipping fee standpoint, and then put together an analysis for us of, your proposal here, or I shouldn't say proposal, but answer to our question is 10 to 15 million is what it would cost to really clean all of it up. But what do you see as a reasonable dollar figure for this item, and how would you allocate that between the items that you listed below with fence and shrub cleanup and beautification efforts and all of those things, and then to give us something that we can either work up or down from as we go through the rest of this process?
I think that's the approach I'd like to take is to work with staff to hone in on this, get the community feedback on what they see are some of those needs, and then come back to you with some more concrete recommendations.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I don't know whether you mentioned it, Mr. Manager, but once we get the public input, we'd likely be looking at a special policy session for the council at least one of those in order to begin to prioritize how we want to spend this funding. Councilmember Sear?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Manager, just a few questions. Number one, what are the rules again? We read during our policy session a month or so ago for spending the money or committing the money and then spending the money. Can you refresh my memory on that, please?
Thank you, Councilman. Yes, to commit the money, they have to be committed by the end of 2024. So all the funds have to be committed by that date, and then they have to be spent by the end of 2026.
So when you say you'd like to see us make commitment for this year's budget, I mean, we don't have to, right? We don't have to spend the money.
No, you don't have to, but I do think to be impactful with the dollars, I think that you could look at this as we're looking at 2022 and 2023 and developing a spending plan. You can use this to have that larger policy discussion about how do we want to use these funds to help our community recover across all of the eligible spending areas. And there may be some spending areas you don't want to, as a council, decide that you don't want to spend those dollars in. And that's the beauty of the funds coming to the local government and to us as a city, is that you get to decide that as the policymaker.
So while we're sitting on this amount of money, what is our cash management policy while we have possession of that money?
Well, our general fund balance policy is that we need to have 25% of our expenditures. We need to have unrestricted cash reserves of that amount. And we're currently at about 13% is what we're currently sitting at right now.
I didn't ask my question correctly, I guess. What I was really looking for is what kind of interest we're getting on our money while it's sitting in the bank for taxpayers.
So this money is earning interest. So it's earning a small amount of interest on a daily basis that we're getting that. That's considered program income from the federal government standpoint, and so that's money that we don't have to give back to them, but it's money that they are going to want to see us to use that as well and spend that as well.
So we have committed the first $10 million.
That is correct.
Give us some example of when we say it's working cash, where are we spending that money? Can you give us a few examples of that?
Well, you're spending it on police, you're spending it on fire, you're spending it on code enforcement, you're spending it on all the employees that are here in City Hall. That $10 million was an anticipated revenue shortfall that we had in the general fund that goes to pay for all of those employees.
Okay. And last question, on report back question number 1. I've talked to you a little bit about this afternoon. Tell us about the CSO money. We were talking about $6 million, and specifically, I'd like to know a little bit what happened. Have we closed on that $15 million deals we talked about a few weeks ago?
We're wrapping up the loans. I think that there was some paperwork that was being finalized and that our Corporation Counsel was attesting to this week that we needed to submit. So we should be hearing from the state. We did see that we were funded for that program. So hopefully the first year of funding and the second year of funding will be able to move those and progress those forward. So
$15 million was for the first 3-year commitment for the CSO, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Council Member Allen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. City Manager, I had a question on page 17 of the packet under eligible uses, point 4.2 under recipients use funds to invest in infrastructure other than water, sewer, and broadband projects. So just make sure I'm reading this correctly. We're not eligible to use these funds on existing road projects that may have been deferred?
We can use the funding on road projects as long as it's, as they state here, they may use them funds for maintenance of infrastructure or pay-go spending for building of new infrastructure as part of the provision of the general government services to the extent the estimated reduction in revenue due to the public health emergency. So if it fits within lost revenues and you've identified that that's an eligible category, you can use it as for pay-as-you-go spending of capital projects.
So when you say lost revenue, so if there was a road project that was set to be done pre-COVID and it wasn't able to be done due to lost revenue, we would be able to use these funds to complete said project?
Even if it's a planned road project that is planned to be spent in the upcoming years, you can use that money. There's flexibility that's given in these dollars to use it to pay for those road projects. So theoretically, you use it to pay for the road project that you've anticipated using other funds for, and that frees up those other funds to be used elsewhere.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Welcome. Councilmember Riggenbach.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Manager and department heads and staff for itemizing that discussion we had. The museum was pretty robust and all-consuming, so it's really nice to see it categorized and some structure to it. Question number 3 was one that I had particular interest in that night regarding the neighborhood stability, and I had brought up the East Bluff Community Center, PCCEO, POF, some of these organizations, and clearly I don't want to get into saying what they need, but I would hope that they are included in the communication list that the survey will be going out to. And if not, could you make sure that some of these players, EB&HS, I can throw out a bunch of initials if you want, but let's make sure that those agencies that are the boots on the street, if you will, in our neighborhoods are allowed to participate as well and offer their needs and how COVID has affected them. So that would be my only comment.
That's a great point, Councilman. Mr. Manager, can you send us the survey before it goes out?
Yeah, absolutely. It's very short and sweet. We looked at a couple of other communities, Sacramento County, California, and Hartford, Connecticut, and just based it on a couple of of examples like that from larger communities that had very short surveys that just tried to gather that quick citizen input. But we'd be happy to share it.
Okay, it'd be good to see that before it goes out in case council has some input.
Okay.
Okay. Councilmember Jackson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. City Manager, I just wanted a little clarification on number 7, demolitions. Does that relate to housing, commercial, or is it just across the board?
Well, in the packet of potential programs, there's both residential and commercial that's discussed. So we have a need on both sides, but primarily it's the residential construction or demolitions that are probably the most problematic from a neighborhood stabilization standpoint.
Thank you.
Are there any more comments, questions? Thank you for the very detailed report back. Appreciate all the hard work by you, Mr. Manager, and the entire cabinet. Thank you. Can I get a motion to receive and file 21-210, moved by Councilmember Ruckriegel, seconded by, did I see Councilmember Sear? Any other comments, questions? Councilmember Allen? Okay. Okay. Great. Please cast your ballots. Councilmember Velpula?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Thank you. And I know we're going to go to the next item of unfinished business. I just want to thank Councilmember Ruckriegel for pointing out the point of order earlier. And I want to say to everybody, you know, if you see a point of order, an error on my part, I want you to speak up like Councilmember Ruckriegel did. Let me know. I'm still new at this job, right? So let me know, including Council Peterson, please, you know, let me know. And if you don't get my attention, you know, some other way, use the mic. Use the mic. Okay, thank you. Madam Clerk.
Do we have additional unfinished business? Any unfinished business for tonight?
Okay, any other okay, no unfinished business. Next.
Then we would be at new business.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Council members, any new business? Councilmember Sear?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a quick question for Mr. Manager. We're in the middle of July. 2 weeks from now, we will be losing a lot of valuable staff members taking retirement. And it's been great for me working all the staff really, and especially some of the senior staff, that department heads that are leaving. So I'm a little concerned. I talked to you this afternoon. Can you give us a little update what we should expect the next few months as far as hiring and what's going on basically in all the departments? Thank you, Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Councilman. Yes, just very briefly, we have our police chief that will be starting on August 2nd. We have our chief information officer, who will be starting on Monday. We have already hired David Tuttle's replacement at the ECC, and Brian Hitchcock has been with us now for a little over a month and a half. That is working with us. We currently have been working through the finance director position and have made an offer to someone who will be, hopefully they'll be starting on August 2nd in the finance director's role, so we're very happy with that. And then the positions that are still open are the community development director's position. Director Black will be leaving us at the end of the month. And we have the chief diversity and inclusion officer position is currently posted. We're doing a national search on that. We've got some candidates that are applying for that from across the country. And then we also will be posting the corporation counsel's job beginning here probably in the first part of August as well. So we're making progress on the department heads, and we've got some other positions that we still need to fill. We did hire a purchasing manager. We do have to fill the finance manager's role as well. So we're continuing to move forward.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Welcome. Did you mention the start of the new police chief?
The police chief will be starting August 2nd in his position. So,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Seer. Okay. Any other new business? Councilmember Jackson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just kind of wanted to, well, thank you, Mr. Manager, City Manager, for updating us on staffing situations. And I realize this is a very challenging time for staff here, but I commend you all for doing a yeoman's job, considering all the positions we have yet to fill. I just wanted to bring a little attention to this issue of violence that doesn't seem to want to stop in our city. And I had a particularly difficult day at work. I was trying to assign a writing assignment to some students and basically asking them what they wanted to do professionally, when they grew up. One young lady in particular said it didn't matter, 14 years old, and I went on to press her about why. Well, I'm not going to live very long. I said, and this young lady's 14. So I asked her if she'd step out in the hallway, just begin to try to pry and ask her some questions. And, after a while, she kind of talked about the drama that's been going on in and around the community. And at some point, she began to talk about this shooting last night. She was talking to her brother on the phone, who was over around Logan Park, or had been to Logan Park and was somewhere around Star Street. Anyway, she was talking to him when she heard what sounded like firecrackers. Her brother was shot while she was on the telephone having a conversation with him. This student broke down, but anyway, make a long story short, she ran over, had her mom take her over to the location. I got a phone call early this morning. I wasn't aware of it, went to bed early last night. I got a phone call from Terry Burnside about it. He talked about, there had still been some blood over at the crime scene this morning. This young lady said she'd been there 2 hours, and he said, could we do something about getting the area cleaned up? And I got on the phone to Public Works and asked if they could go over there. This is a citywide problem, and the solution is, somewhat complex. I think it's all encompassing, but if you don't mind, I'd like to just move to allow Terry to share with us a little bit about what we could maybe potentially do to address this problem from a city standpoint. But I think it's going to take work on the part of everybody, families, parents, everybody. But if I could, I'd just like to give Terry a couple minutes to talk a little bit about how this is hurting us.
If there's no objections by council, I would ask that Mr. Burnside come to the podium, please. And Mr. Burnside is also a member of the Committee on Police Community Relations. Yes.
Good evening, all. Thank you, Madam Mayor, Council, Ms. Jackson, respectively. Thank you for an opportunity to kind of address what's going on in and around our city. I heard several people make a reference to it tonight about the uptick in violence. It's been a vicious pattern here in Peoria, and we haven't put a whole lot of emphasis and efforts on trying to address it from my perspective. It's disturbing to me when I hear that we are compared with Chicago. People have identified Peoria as a little Chicago. Of course, with the population, we're no comparison. But on the flip side of it, if you look at it per capita, Peoria, we're just as bad. We're not too far off the beaten path. Me personally, been a victim of gun violence. I lost a brother, will be 32 years this October. He was murdered in the streets of the city of Peoria. His son is an amputee due to gun violence. He lost a leg. I had a son get shot twice, and within a year, he's still living by the grace of God. I had a daughter get shot, being at the wrong place at the wrong time. And as we all well know, bullets really have no names. You know, people don't kill, or should I say, the guns don't kill, people do, kind of stuff. You know, so I'm just kind of all over because it's real. I'm real passionate about addressing gun violence, not just in our city, but in my family as well. On several occasions, I've reached out and contacted several organizations who have evidence-based strategies in multiple cities and states that are proven and successful in curtailing gun violence in their communities. I've gotten involved with PCAV so that I could share with them what I learned in different cities and states. I joined the Police and Community Advisory Committee to assist with building bridges between the community and the police. What I've learned is that the real driving force behind the success for organizations who are addressing the gun violence is the community. We have to be the change agents who will be the change that we desire to see. We must be proactive as opposed to being reactive. I've attended countless city council meetings, and I can't ever recall hearing resources being allocated towards violence prevention, violence reduction, that would eventually help with public safety. A huge part will come from people who I identify as credible messengers. Credible messengers are individuals who are reputable and people with integrity who are on the front line, in the trenches, boots to the ground, addressing the conflict on the front end before it escalates. Those are the people who are mediating conflicts, who are resolving, having conflict resolution and resolving mediating a lot of situations. We can't police ourselves out of this situation simply because if you think about it, the police are called when? It's always after a situation erupts. I've learned that a lot of what's going on isn't group, but instead it's interpersonal conflict and disagreements. What we're witnessing is a public health crisis similar to the pandemic that we are currently in. Also, like the pandemic, the gun violence can be brought under control. The pandemic has been put in check, so to speak, with vaccinations and education. The gun violence can be put in check with evidence-based strategies and trainings. That's the part where Peoria, we need to align ourselves with groups and partners who are shifting the paradigm and reducing gun violence in the respective cities. Briefly, relationships are the new currency. Thank you for your time, and that's mine.
Thank you, Mr. Burnside. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Burnside before I let you leave?
I do have one, Terry. Could you talk a little bit about the meeting that you had someone come down and share some information with us about funding and how Peoria could potentially benefit from it as it relates to anti-violence efforts?
There are a lot of different things that are in place that's going on throughout the country. One of the biggest things is called the Fund Peace Campaign. It's dealing with President Biden just not long ago allocated like $5 billion, $50 billion toward grassroots organizations who are dealing with a lot of the violence on the front end. Had a group come from Chicago and introduce some things to Peoria. Another group came maybe 2 weeks later. This has all happened within the last month. Another group came, was called Live Free Illinois. They came down and shared some things with us on some different things that they are putting into place that are helping them curtail a lot of violence in their city. Relationships. I've built a lot of relationships throughout the country with a lot of different people from PCAV, HPCAV, Chattanooga. I've been all over the country just learning stuff, kind of critique the model that I think that would be helpful to us in the city of Peoria. There's just a lot of things going on. So asking people to come and share with us what's working in the city. A lot of people are on board, they're welcoming it, and they are just waiting for us to invite them.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Thank you for your work and within our community as well as in other parts of the nation. So thank you for your contributions.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Member Jackson, have you wrapped up?
Yes, thank you.
Councilmember Allen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Again, thank you, Mr. Burnside. Appreciate your work and what you're doing for our community. I just had a few items. I'll be very brief. The first item is I just want to acknowledge the organizers of the community memorial event that took place this past Sunday that acknowledged and observed those lost to gun violence. They read over 180 names over a period of I don't know how many years, but too many of those names were recognizable. I'll tell you that, former classmates of mine, and just it's just sad. But I really appreciate the organizers doing that down at Morton Square Park. And I think that's a step in the right direction, but we have to continue to keep putting action behind that. But thank you to the organizers. I also want to address this to City Manager Yerk. I talked to him earlier about this, but I want to ask him to bring back a report illustrating projects that have been started or completed by the CSO and stormwater utility fees to our next meeting. I think that would help with some of the anxiety that has come about since these bills have now been sent out. I know I've received a few emails, and so I think that if we can illustrate what's being done with these funds or what's on the horizon, that we can spread that gospel to our constituents, I think that would be great and go a long way as far as managing expectations to our constituents. And then lastly, on a positive note, I want to promote the Heart of Illinois Fair, the longest running fair, I believe, in the state of Illinois, 72 years. I attended the ribbon cutting ceremony earlier with Mayor Ali, and she acknowledged the Heart of Illinois Heroes, which was a initiative to acknowledge some of our unsung heroes in the community. So it was very positive, and it's going on right in the 4th District, so shameless plug there. But we need to make sure we get out here and support the Heart of Illinois Fair. Talking to fair organizers, the last 3 years have been very tough on the fair. There was conversation if they were going to be able to actually keep it going. They're using a new carnival company, so they're trying to keep it going for our city and the surrounding areas. So please get out there, take your kids, support it, because we need these quality of life opportunities for our city. So just please get out there and support the fair. Thank you.
Thank you, and ditto about the fair. It was great to ride down Northmore, look over Expo Gardens and see all the Ferris wheels and all the rides. It's great to have the Heart of Illinois Fair back in Peoria. So get out there. They're open tonight. Councilmember Greb?
Yes, as promised, I'm going to ask the Superintendent of Police to come to the lectern to answer some questions in reference to some issues we've had with hot guns in this community. Chief, first of all, I want to say that as interim police superintendent, I think you've done an absolutely fabulous job. And your many years of service to this community, what you've done for us has not been lost on me. I remember having issues to deal with in the Star Griswold area and other areas as an at-large. And you were involved in some of those details and dealing with some of those issues when you were a patrolman. And here you are now as interim superintendent of police with maybe only a few days left. You and the men and women in blue who have been out on the streets have been working very, very hard for all of us and for our citizens to keep us safe. And that includes all the efforts that were made to curtail illegal fireworks, almost like it's impossible to do it when you have two states that are immediately adjacent selling this stuff, the availability of this stuff. You did a fantastic job under the circumstances. And when you consider some of the shootings that occurred that very night, and we were trying to get the fireworks under control, you did even a better job. I don't know how you and the men and women in blue hold up day after day, week after week. And I think there's a lack of appreciation for it. in some quarters. But the vast majority of people in Peoria appreciate what you're doing. Now, what I'm going to say in no way is designed to get some discussion about gun control. That's not where we're going here, folks. I don't believe there's anybody in this room who is for repealing the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution, and certainly not this councilman. However, Chief, after a recent break-in at one of our local gun stores, you and I had an interesting conversation about what's been happening, not just in Peoria, but all over our state. And I believe our president even touched on this in a recent visit to Chicago. And that is the epidemic of guns falling into the hands of disreputable people, hardened criminals, garden variety criminals, etc. And you mentioned to me that you were not only concerned about what happens related to break-ins to some of our gun stores, but what's happened indeed statewide. And I know that the Peoria Police has some ideas on what we can do to ensure that every purveyor of guns, commercial purveyor of guns in this community that is legally allowed to do so, have a good idea how they can do it in a safer fashion to ensure that these guns are less likely to fall into criminal hands during a time of civil turmoil or after business hours. And the police department, I believe, can make recommendations to business owners about that. And I believe you have. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you, Councilman. First of all, thank you for your earlier statement. It's 28 years. I'm not leaving quite yet, but I am looking forward to August 2nd. You guys write that down, Mayor? August 2nd. But it's been a privilege to be the interim chief of police, but it's been an honor to be a Peoria policeman for 28 years. So thank you for that. But yes, I do. I've had, and you know, Terry talked about it. Everybody's talking about it. The nation's now talking about, you know, referencing gun violence. And this didn't start this year. We've seen this start to rise in the last couple of years, not just in our city, but others. And in referencing gun stores, burglaries of gun stores, you know, I think we're making a point out of that. You know, we do remember that when we're talking about, you know, small businesses here being victimized is what can happen, what does happen. You know, the reason they're being targeted is because of the merchandise that they're selling. What can start as a legal gun can easily end up being an illegal gun very quickly, just based on the theft of that gun. And that's what I'm talking about here, is the impact of those illegal guns. Nothing against, you know, individual gun ownership or private gun sales and those things. So I just want that to be noted. But it has been an ongoing issue, and there's been multiple burglaries of dozens and dozens of weapons throughout our community and other close by communities over the last couple of years. And those guns are here. Those guns are in our city. Those guns came back to our city. And those guns are found weekly, daily sometimes, by Peoria police officers. Sometimes on suspects, sometimes on crime scenes. So they're located. So it's an issue. And it's something that we're constantly dealing with. So when I'm talking about a particular issue in reference to security of gun stores, they have the parameters set in place of the requirements of video and an alarm. Okay? And the stores that have been burglarized, whether it's in our city or in surrounding communities, have had those things. But I also think that there's also a civic responsibility based on the merchandise that you're selling to do more, that we could ask to do more, to make sure that an alarm system is up to par, to sufficient, technologically advanced, to harden the exterior of a building, right? The site. I mean, we can learn that from our jewelry stores that have learned that over the last 100, 200 years. You don't put the diamonds out front at night. I find it somewhat ironic that our cannabis dispensaries in the state of Illinois have to be more secure than our gun stores. So what I would ask or request is that, with that responsibility of both gun ownership and gun sales, is everybody does whatever they can to try to prevent this. It's certainly not their fault if a criminal breaks into their business or their home to attempt to steal a gun, to perhaps use that out on the street. But the request would be to do everything that they could to help us and to prevent it on the front end. There's locking devices. There's additional time that can be, made, or responsibility at the end of the day, at the end of the time you're closing your business, to make sure things are secure and locked up. I don't want to get into specific individual techniques of locks and devices and all the things, because then I just be presented at what it could be defeated. But we could certainly, and we have on occasion went to individual businesses and made those requests. Unfortunately, in the last couple of years, the targets of opportunity have been smash and grab small business gun shops. They haven't been your big chains, the high security chains. They're smash and grab, generally very weak exterior, in and out, steal as many guns as whoever happens to be there can get, and then disperse them across our city, unfortunately. And over the course of the last couple of years, our officers have recovered, I won't give an exact number, I know it, but well over 100. Last week, and I don't want to, individualize or pinpoint, but that was the most recent one. There was excellent police work that revolved around that incident and that case. Obviously, an arrest was made fairly quickly, and I'm happy to report that 17 of those guns were recovered by our officers due to good police work in pretty quick fashion. So the longer these type guns are out there, the more they turn up. We certainly don't like them turning up one at a time, because that's usually a bad day. I'm happy to take anybody else's questions if they have any.
Other questions? Council Member Jackson?
Chief, just out of curiosity, since the incident last week, have you had opportunity to talk to the owner of that particular shop, and has he or she agreed to more security measures?
We have had a lot of follow-up in reference to the case, Councilwoman. I didn't think it was prudent at this time to have that conversation with him, because the investigation is still, the detectives are still handling the criminal side of the investigation in reference to the crime that was committed. So I didn't want to get involved with that. But yes, we will be following up in reference to that. So there's obviously been a lot of cops in that store since then. But as far as the conversation from myself to that particular gun store, I have not had that one yet.
Thank you.
Councilmember Allen?
Thank you, Chief. This might sound like a very green question, but is there any type of financial resources available that gun owners can apply for to beef up their security at their establishment, or is it just on the sole responsibility of the owner of the facility?
Yeah, I believe it's on the sole responsibility. But, you know, and some, you know, just like any business, presentation of their business, some spend more than others, right? I think, you know, as far as the expectation, I think that most of these store owners, unfortunately, the individual small business gun owners, a lot of them have already been victimized at least once in the area at one time or another. So, you know, they've had opportunities to scale up their security in most cases, and a lot have. But no, and you know, I think that, you know, I don't know the numbers, but I know the gun sales are, I think they're doing pretty well from what I hear. So I would assume there's, you know, without the business model involved, I would assume that there would be money for that privately.
And then just one more comment, Madam Mayor. Is there any thought to perform an audit of existing businesses to see where their security is when it comes to their inventory of guns?
Yes. That is generally left up to either on the state level, the Illinois State Police, or on the federal level, the ATF handles inventory and audits and for those sort of things. We certainly can have interaction. We obviously work with those other agencies in conjunction all the time. But as far as auditing, that's their responsibility.
Thank you.
Chief, there's a local professor and researcher that works with the police department now and then to do some training. And he indicated that there was some type of grant that Peoria Police Department had received that focused on reducing gun violence. Can you speak to that?
Is it Dr. White? Is that who you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, they're still in the process of working through that, but it all ties into technology for the department and research involved in reference to violent crime. So I think that it's in really initial phases. I think he just got asked to do it, so I don't think there has been much correspondence with him yet. But I do know, obviously, Dr. White has worked with our department on many levels for many years, so we look forward to working with him on that.
Is it state money, federal?
It's federal.
It's federal money.
Yeah.
Can you tell us the amount?
Several $100,000. I'm sorry, I don't have it written down.
That's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can let me know later.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
A lot of numbers running through my head daily, so
Okay.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
I understand.
Yes.
So I don't think there are any more questions, but we do appreciate all the service. 28 years with Peoria Police. That's very honorable. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilman. Madam Clerk?
We are at citizens' opportunity to address the City Council and Town Board.
And I have one notice, and it's from Mr. Pete Schmidt. Mr. Schmidt?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As the mayor said, I am Pete Schmidt, and I live in Councilman Allen's 4th District on West Glen Avenue. I am one of 4 landlords who has been meeting monthly for 4.5 years with at City Hall with several people, primarily with code enforcement, but with several folks that are sitting around this horseshoe have been in attendance. And everybody around this horseshoe to whom I have reached out has been responsive, and I have completely changed my attitude about a number of things. First time I ever met with Director Ross Black, I had to ambush him in his office. He didn't know I was coming, and I didn't have an appointment. And he sat down with me, and ever since then, things have gone in a very positive way for me. Our small group of 4, our main reason for starting our group was to address city landlord issues and to propose what we hoped might be workable solutions to those issues. We felt that the larger landlord groups seemed to be good at complaining, but didn't often offer any method of rectifying what they felt was wrong. Several city council members, as well as former Mayor Ardis and current Mayor Ali, have met with us off campus to hear our concerns and answer our questions. Council members Jensen, Euler, and Ruckriegel have all been in attendance at multiple of our meetings to share their knowledge and offer suggestions. And I'd like to suggest to all those who own rental property in the city of Peoria, I'd suggest that they get to know their city council people and get to know the folks in the code enforcement department. As I said, 5 years ago, I thought code enforcement was my biggest enemy. And I couldn't have been more wrong. Joe, Director Black, his assistant, Joe Doolin, and the folks who work for them are now what I consider one of my biggest assets as a landlord. Ross has taken the time to work with our group, and Joe and his people have helped me navigate some nightmare situations with which I've had to deal. So I'd just like to say that Ross is somebody that we are going to miss very much, and whoever assumes his role has some very big shoes to fill. So thanks, Ross, for letting me bend your ear that first time we met, and for spending these last several years working with our group. If the landlords would get to know the city council and get to know the inspectors, those folks are just doing their job. And if you learn to work with them, they're great folks to work with. They write tickets to us for things that the tenants are responsible for, and they don't want to be doing that. We've been able to establish communication with these folks. They're responsive. They get back to us. They let us know what's going on. The only thing we haven't been able to overcome yet is how do we make tenants accountable? Because they are lots of times the ones that are causing the problems. So in any event, again, thanks, Ross. Thanks, City Council people, Mr. Manager, Corporation Council. You folks have all been involved in what we've got going on. And I'm speaking for the other 3 guys in our group also, one of whom is sitting behind me here. We want to thank you for what you've done for us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. You're very influential. You hold people accountable. You make it easy to work with yourself and your group. And I just want to thank you for your kind words for city staff and council as well, and the city manager. Thank you. Madam Clerk, yes, Madam Clerk.
We are at executive session, and I do not believe we have one tonight, so then we are at adjournment.
Okay, can I get a motion to adjourn our meeting? Boy, about 6 hands went up. Okay. Moved by Councilman Allen, seconded by Councilman Sear. Please cast your ballots. Council Member Velpula.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. Our meeting is adjourned.